Oh, what hell looks like. Chat! You know what they say about hell? You meet Satan. Is that Berlin? Whatever city you want it to be, that's the hell that you want. I'm ready. This is hell.
Imagine breathing air so toxic your lungs bleed, where children are born with deformities from the metals in their mother's blood. Picture sleeping in a wire cage, your body contorted in a space smaller than a prison cell, as cockroaches crawl beneath your back.
Oh, it was just Asmongold's stream room then.
Toxic wastelands where nothing grows,
to
sprawling slums ruled by gangs who execute trespassers on sight. These are the most horrifying urban hells ever seen. So let's go and take a journey around the world to see the lives of people living in hell on Earth. Here we are in what was once the most densely populated place on Earth, the Kowloon Walled City. Now imagine for a moment, a single city block housing 50,000 people all crammed into just 6.4 acres of land.
Chat, imagine the smell. Ugh.
That's roughly 3.3 million people per square mile. The buildings grow so close together that sunlight never reached the ground level. Hundreds of unplanned structures were built on top of each other, creating a three-dimensional maze of corridors, staircases, and tunnels plunged.
And look at the fucking wiring sticking out. You get zapped by that and become a superhero.
Into perpetual darkness.
Gotham
In this
City,
lawless
chat.
enclave, formerly located in North Hong Kong, triads ran illegal offices next to drug dens and brothels. Unregulated factories operated day and night. Dog meat processors, unlicensed medical clinics, and sweatshops all crammed into tiny apartments. Though the city was eventually demolished in 1994, its legacy lives on in Hong Kong's modern housing crisis. As fast forward today, and more than 200,000 people live in what locals call coffin homes. Spaces so small they'd be illegal to house prisoners in most of the world. These 15 square foot apartments are barely long enough.
15 square feet? Bro, you can't even like roll over. You can hear people fucking beating off.
Enough to lie down in, and not even tall enough to stand in. And yet they still cost around $200 to $500 a month, which is about half the average income. This isn't even cheap considering what you're getting. And the most horrifying of Hong Kong's coffin homes are the cage homes, where people live in wire mesh boxes stacked 3 high in dilapidated buildings.
Why do they put them into cages, man? What are they, rats?
Some buildings in the Sham, Shui Po, and Mong Kok districts house thousands of these subdivided units, with entire families living in 40 square foot spaces, cooking, sleeping, and studying all on the same bed. And of course, air conditioning is a luxury in summer, as temperatures inside these metal boxes can reach 100 Fahrenheit.
Hong Kong is sweltering under one of its hottest summers on record. It's hard to stay cool even when there's a breeze. So imagine what it's like to be holed up in a home like this. There are 15 individual flats in this 33 square meter apartment.
15 residents live here, each to a cubicle. Everything.
How do you make food, or like, where do you shit, chat?
They own crammed into narrow shelves.
It's cozy. Oh yeah, real cozy.
But let's go travel over to Peru, where you can find the world's highest city. And yet this city, the closest city to the heavens, might also be the most hellish place on Earth. Emilio Sukase still remembers his first day in La Rinconada. It was 1995, and at the age of 17, he arrived at the settlement perched at a quite literally breathtaking 16,700 feet above sea level, the highest permanent human habitation on Earth. And the name La Rinconada translates to the cornered one, a fitting description for this place where desperation meets opportunity. That first day,
I think I watched a video and the guy went up there and you instantly, your head starts hurting because there's like no air there and you have to get acclimated. It's that high up the mountain.
Thin mountain air hit Emilio like a physical blow. His head throbbed mercilessly, his gums bled, and waves of nausea left him doubled over. Every breath contained half the oxygen found at sea level, so his body responded the only way it could, by producing extra red blood cells, a natural adaptation that would eventually make his blood dangerously thick and strain his heart. And yet despite these hardships, Emilio stayed, like the 50,000 others who now call this place home, as the need for work was too desperate to turn back. 28 years later, and Emilio has survived longer than most. The average miner here lives to just 35 years old. Walking through the muddy, trash-strewn streets, he
Shit, how many of you are like that old, man? You'd be dead!
glasses men with the telltale purple-blue lips and hands, which are
Oh my
infamous signs of
God.
chronic mountain sickness that affects many long-time residents. La Rinconada sits precariously on the side of Mount Anania, all beneath a glacier called the Sleeping Beauty, though there's nothing beautiful about what happens beneath
very
it. In the
beautiful.
mine where Emilio works, gold extraction happens through a primitive method that's barely changed in centuries. Miners grind ore, treat it with mercury, and then burn off the mercury to isolate the gold. This vaporized mercury then settles in everything. The soil, the water, even the
So
rain.
you
Emilio
just
has seen
die?
the consequences firsthand. Neurological damage, birth defects, and
Gives you
cancer throughout
cancer,
the population.
bro.
Children develop chronic respiratory problems within months of birth. After decades of working underground, Emilio's lungs bear the scars of silicosis, a disease caused by inhaling silica dust. Medical surveys have shown that 50 to 60% of miners' bodies show evidence of this condition. But what keeps Emilio and others trapped in this nightmarish place is an economic system so exploitative it borders on slavery. He works under a system of 30 days of unpaid labor followed by a single day where miners can take whatever ore they can carry out on their backs.
So there's probably like people that die in there during fights and stuff, chat. Yeah, like they shank each other like prison rules. It's like what is it called? The Purge. That's crazy. They probably kill each other for like little like pieces so that they can sell it. What if one guy finds nothing and then he's just fucked? He dies, man.
Whether that ore
Oh
contains
my
any gold is
God.
just pure chance.
You
Some
guys
months
think you
may
have a
bring enough
bad
to feed his
life,
family,
huh?
but many others bring nothing. La Rinconada has earned the Spanish nickname La Ciudad Sin Ley del Peru, meaning the lawless city of Peru. Law enforcement is virtually non-existent. In 2019 alone, authorities rescued 68 victims of human trafficking from the town's slum nightclubs.
Oh
the
my
same year,
God.
7 miners were found executed in a tunnel, each with a bullet to the head. Emilio has considered leaving many times,
It's
especially when
mafia
gold prices
time.
drop. When prices spiked by 235% between 2001 and 2009, this mountain city's population swelled up by 30,000 more people, all chasing the same dream that brought him here as a teenager. And as he walks home through the streets awash with sewage and mercury, Emilio understands better than most
the
why La
water.
Rinconada is called the Cornered One. It's a place where people with no other option come to die slowly in the pursuit of wealth that they'll likely never find. But what actually is a slum? Well, the UN calls them informal settlements characterized by inadequate housing and squalid living conditions. But this clinical definition really fails to capture the brutal reality of these urban environments, where millions are packed into spaces designed for thousands and where infrastructure has collapsed, meaning the social contract between citizens and government has effectively dissolved. To see what I mean by this, let's head over to Nairobi. As soon as you arrive
it's
in
Africa,
Kibera, the
isn't
first
it?
thing that
Yeah.
hits you is the stench. It's an
New York, Detroit. Guys, I'm starting to think Detroit is probably not that bad. Guys.
unmistakable smell of human waste that hangs in the air and never quite leaves your nostrils, even after you've long gone. With such limited sanitary options, many residents turn to flying toilets, which is plastic bags filled with human waste and flung onto rooftops or into ditches.
Flying toilets, chat. That is so gross, man. What if that bag breaks and just shit everywhere?
When the heavy rain comes, as they frequently do, these bags burst open. The narrow dirt paths between shacks transform into flowing rivers of excrement that children must wade through on their way to the makeshift schools.
Oh my
Outbreaks of diseases
God,
like
man.
typhoid are so common they barely make local news anymore. Africa's largest slum packs some 500,000 people into an area barely 3 kilometers across. The vast majority of these people survive on less than $2 a day in a single-room shack built from mud, scrap metal, and plastic sheeting. And yet, despite these conditions, it continues to grow. Rural Kenyans arrive daily seeking
Fucking
opportunity
river
in
of shit,
Nairobi, only to
chat.
find themselves trapped in a cycle of poverty.
I
that
don't know, I'm
passes
feeling
from one
kinda grateful
generation to
right
the
now,
next.
chat.
And all the way over in Venezuela and Butari, you struggle to sleep from all the gunfire echoing across the hillsides at night. By dawn, you'd need to check with neighbors about what streets saw fighting overnight and which gangs now control what territory. This sprawling favela built on steep hillsides around Caracas houses nearly 2 million
Oh,
people
that's
from
famous,
what might be one of
Caracas.
the most dangerous neighborhoods in the Western Hemisphere. With
Yeah.
a murder rate of 90 per 100,000 residents, more than double Venezuela's national average, death is a daily reality here. Gang wars in Butari aren't quick exchanges but drawn-out battles that can last for days. Residents then become prisoners in their own homes as bullets tear through thin walls.
And you
of
can't go to
makeshift
school or
houses.
work.
Because of this, police barely ever enter these neighborhoods,
That's so
leaving teenage
sad,
gang
bro.
members with high-powered weapons to establish their own brutal form of order.
Perma hardcore
The physical layout
PvP
makes
mode,
violence
man.
almost inevitable. Houses are stacked haphazardly on the hills, creating a maze of narrow pathways, hidden corners, and endless escape routes for criminals. Children here then learn survival skills as basic life lessons. Kids as young as 4 are taught to hit the floor at the first sound of gunfire.
Those kids have like actual PTSD, man. At 4?
Reflex that becomes as natural as breathing.
Oh my god.
What unites these mega slums isn't just their size, but their unchanging nature. They are intergenerational traps where millions are born, live, and die without ever experiencing the basic services that most take for granted. And in most cases, they're only growing. But before we continue, I used to always think that quitting my bad habit would be impossible. And it turns out I was right. That's because it's not about quitting, it's about replacing. And that's where fume comes in. No vapor, no nicotine, just natural flavored air that actually satisfies. No stress, no withdrawals, just a simple swap.
Chat, we were talking about shit rivers not even 3 minutes ago, okay?
Because you see, fume is an award-winning flavored air device with no vapor, no nicotine, just natural flavor. Bringing the flavor to your mouth and not your lungs. Which completely fills the void that ditching a bad habit can leave, allowing you to quit the habit of vaping as a habitual aid instead of a drug, meaning that you can use it anywhere with no smoke, no vapor, and no restrictions, as it's 100% nicotine free, there's no chemicals and no addiction. And they also use non-toxic flavors, all with natural ingredients. And because of all of this, you never need batteries or even have to charge it.
Sorry,
you just
allergies.
pick it up and go, all for a fraction of the cost of vaping or smoking. And with its premium weighted design, it just looks slick and feels great in your hand. As they're just built to fidget with magnetic snaps, clicks, and adjustable airflow dial that sounds so satisfying. Personally, my go-to flavor is crisp mint because it's super refreshing and keeps me feeling sharp throughout the day.
Maple
but Fume does
pepper.
offer a ton of different flavors, so there's something for everyone. If vapor was compared to sticky soda, fume cores are closer to herbal teas, allowing you to satisfy your oral fixation through a passive diffusion system that utilizes no electronics, vapor, or combustion. And that's why Fume is even backed by doctors across the US. So go to tryfume.com/moon or scan the QR code and use Moon to get your free Fume topper when you order your journey pack today. Now we're about to take a cold plunge as we head into one of the darkest, coldest, most polluted, and most depressing settlements.
Everybody knows about this place. It's an old ass mining town, isn't it?
On the entire planet. Sergei's alarm goes off at 6 AM, but there's no sunrise to greet him. For 2 months of Norilska's winter, the sun never appears above the horizon. He'll work his entire shift in the nickel plant in darkness and return home in darkness. This is the life 300 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle. And as he opens his apartment window to check the weather, a familiar metallic taste hits the back of his throat. The sulfur dioxide is particularly bad today. He can actually see the yellow-tinged fog hanging between the Soviet-era apartment blocks. Breakfast is quick and basic, just tea and bread from the limited selection at the local store. There's an eerie silence all around him, always feeling like he's being watched. Fresh produce is a luxury in this isolated outpost, as it's accessible only by air for much of the year. This is exactly what Russians call a closed city, where you need permission to enter or even leave. It's almost totally cut off in the winter and has no road connections. As he makes his way outside, Sergei crunches through snow that's stained black from metal particles constantly settling from the air. There's very little wildlife inside the city limits. The few scraggly trees that manage to grow are stunted and twisted. This ecological dead zone—
it's like Fallout. Look at the— oh my god, look at the factory fume. You can see that far away.
Extends for 30 kilometers in every direction, all from the enormous Nornickel smelting complex that dominates the skyline. This industrial plant is why everyone is here, and it belches out 1.9 million tons of sulfur dioxide annually, more than the entire United States combined. But this also provides the relatively high wages that keeps this city 175,000 residents from leaving. At lunch, Sergei will chat with a co-worker whose 5-year-old daughter was diagnosed with a 3rd respiratory infection this winter. Children born in the city develop chronic breathing problems before they can even walk. The local birth defect rate is significantly higher than the national average. It's why doctors quietly advise that pregnant women leave the city and never come back. The workday then ends, and Sergei steps back into the perpetual night, where temperatures can plummet to an insane -40.
Bro, the men and women that live there must love their families so much to stay there. Holy shit.
Fahrenheit. This is the point where Fahrenheit and Celsius converge. His breath completely freezes instantly, forming ice crystals on his scarf, and this brutal winter lasts 9 months. Back home, he doesn't open the windows again no matter how stuffy the apartment gets. The ground beneath his building is contaminated with copper, arsenic, lead, and nickel at levels hundreds of times above safety standards, which is why it's no surprise that cancer rates are 2.5 times the Russian average, and life expectancy is 10 years shorter than anywhere else in the country. As he prepares for bed, Sergei might glance at photos of relatives living in southern Russia. Why doesn't he leave? Well, this place gets in your blood, literally and figuratively. Norilsk was built for industry, first by expendable gulag prisoners during Stalin's era, now maintained by workers making the grim economic bargain to earn more now, but almost certainly die sooner.
There's a lot of places in the world that are like that too, where they have people that just kind of throw themselves in there because it pays a good amount, and then they send the money back to their family so that they can keep sustaining themselves. It's very sad, but like it's pretty common everywhere.
2,500 miles west of Dzerzhinsk, and you'll find a different flavor of toxic hell. Dimitri's morning commute to Dzerzhinsk takes him past faded Soviet-era murals celebrating chemical production. One depicts scientists in white coats proudly creating new compounds. Another shows workers handling industrial materials. As one of Russia's key sites for chemical weapon production, including toxic nerve agents, the city holds the dubious honor of being named the most chemically polluted city on Earth by the
Dzerzhinsk? How do you say Dzerzhinsk?
Guinness Book of World Records. And so the soil here contains dioxin levels 17
I've never
million
heard of
times the safe limit. Quarter of the city's population works in chemical factories.
Wow.
Dimitri's father did, as did his father before him. Most days he can tell which plant is running which process by the particular smell and color of the emissions rising from different smokestacks across the industrial zone. At the factory cafeteria, conversations often turn to health issues. Almost everyone has some sort of ailment, respiratory problems, skin conditions, or more serious diseases. The death rate here exceeds the birth rate by an astonishing 260%, and life expectancy hovers at 42 years for men and 47 for women.
I hope that he covers that one town that has a horrible, like, respiratory problem in America. The one that dumps all the, like, ex-mining stuff into the river. I forget where it is. It's somewhere in the Midwest, I think.
Shortest in the industrialized world. What connects both of these Russian cities is their shared history. Industrial centers built with little regard for human life. First to fulfill communist production quotas, now to generate profits for oligarchs. The environment has changed, but the basic question remains the same. People's health is sacrificed for industrial output. And nowhere shows this better than the world's biggest e-waste dump. All the way over in Ghana. You see, Emmanuel was just 18 when both of his parents died, leaving him responsible for his entire family. At the age of just 22, his hands bear the scars of 4 years working in what was once Africa's
Oh my god, and all that shit's burning into your lungs.
Largest e-waste dump located
Michigan
on the outskirts of Accra, Ghana's bustling capital. With no opportunities in his rural village in Ghana's northern region, Emmanuel made the 500-mile journey to Accra. Following rumors of work in the sprawling e-waste site locals grimly call Sodom and Gomorrah, after the forsaken biblical cities. Today begins like every other. Emmanuel joins the hundreds of other young men just like him, spreading across mountains of
and they don't have shoes on either.
Guarded electronics that stretch as far as the eye can see. Laptops, smartphones, tablets, TVs, all shipped in from the developed world. Some are broken beyond repair, but Emmanuel knows many are fully functional. There's simply no time to test them all when survival depends on volume. By mid-morning, the heat is just unbearable. It's 40 degrees Celsius, extremely humid.
They also rip the cobalt and copper out of your phone. Your phone's probably wound up there too.
Working tirelessly on an empty stomach and has already dismantled dozens of devices, separating valuable copper wires and circuit boards from worthless plastic casings. Around him, fires burn constantly as workers melt plastic coatings off copper wires. The acrid smoke contains a toxic cocktail of lead, cadmium, mercury, and flame retardants, chemicals all linked to high rates of cancer and neurological damage.
The men and boys working here, and they range between 13 and 35 years old. They're not from Accra, they come from the north of the country, and they came here on a sort of gold rush, promised riches from waste. But the riches turned out to be a pittance, and the gold turned out to be lead, cadmium, and other heavy metals lodged in their bodies.
And it's fucked up because they probably don't know that this is happening because of this. I very much doubt it.
and slowly
kept ignorant.
poisoning them.
The headaches are the worst, Emmanuel says, pressing his temples. Sometimes I just cannot see clearly for hours after work. For a week of such labor, he will just earn about $60 US. And scientists who study this place estimate that workers in these conditions often die before reaching the age of 30.
Yeah,
Emmanuel knows the risks
breathe,
but has no
pass out,
alternatives. And not far from where Emmanuel works, a group of children, some as young as 7, pick through smaller electronics. They've developed expertise in identifying valuable components. Their small fingers able to access parts adults just can't reach. Each child supports a family somewhere, just as Emmanuel does. Though the main scrapyard was officially demolished in 2021 following international pressure, the e-waste flow hasn't stopped. It's simply
Yeah, where are you gonna put it? Somewhere else, bro.
being dispersed to other sites around Accra, making the problem less visible but no less deadly. So Emmanuel now works in one of these satellite locations where conditions are just as hazardous. But when you upgrade your device, the current one you're watching with might end up in Emmanuel's hands. And then as night falls, Emmanuel returns to the tiny room he shares with 4 other e-waste workers for the rest of his life. His lungs burn, his fingers bleed from small cuts, and tomorrow he'll wake up
you just
to do this
die,
all
man.
over
Where
again.
do you
But
die?
now let's turn our heads over to Central Asia, in one of the largest but mostly sparsely populated areas on Earth. A local shepherd, Azamat, rises before dawn, just as shepherds have for centuries in the mountains of Kyrgyzstan. The 56-year-old's weathered face shows the marks of a lifetime spent outdoors in Central Asia's harsh climate. But unlike his ancestors, Azamat faces an invisible enemy that no traditional knowledge can combat. As he leads his flock of sheep from their pen, he mentally maps out the day's route. Some valleys are worse than others. Some hills must never be climbed. This knowledge wasn't passed down through generations, but learned through bitter experience. 3 years ago, I lost my flock after they grazed for too long near the old mine entrance. As he explains, he points to a distant hillside that looks no different from any other. The animals become sick, he says. Their wool fell out in patches and they died within weeks. Now, what makes Azamat's home, Imalu,
and then he loses his whole flock and he can't harvest them. He can't eat the meat either. Oh, poor guy.
different from other pastoral communities is what lies beneath the surface. This small town of 20,000 people sits atop 23 massive Soviet-era dumps containing 1.96 million cubic meters of radioactive uranium waste, enough to poison all of Central Asia if ever released. In this incredibly poor region, with unemployment reaching 70%, most residents have no choice but to stay. They grow vegetables in contaminated soil and build homes on land where radiation levels exceed international safety standards by hundreds of times. And so by mid-morning, Azamat has guided his sheep to one of the few safe grazing areas he's identified over the years. These spots are precious and increasingly rare. Landslides, common in this geologically active region, regularly expose new pockets of contamination or spread existing waste into previously clean areas. The danger in Malusu isn't obvious to the untrained eye.
And what if that becomes even more contaminated because it leaks into like every other little patchy area? I can imagine with that much waste, it probably spreads throughout the country, no? Yeah, it's like Fallout in real life.
The landscape is stunningly beautiful, rolling hills and narrow valleys cut by clear mountain streams, but cancer rates here are nearly 5 times the national average, and birth defects are just commonplace. As noon approaches, Azamat carefully checks his water supply. He never drinks from local streams anymore, as he knows this is completely toxic. But not everyone takes notice of that or cares. Azamat points to children playing near one of the dumps, which looks like nothing more than an ordinary hill. Eyewitnesses
and they probably just don't know any better.
Say that many people are totally unaware of the town's history. Children aren't taught about it and are oblivious when asked. And as the sun begins to set, Azamat leads his flock back to their pen. He takes a longer route to avoid a hillside that recently collapsed after heavy rains, potentially exposing new radioactive material. International aid agencies have attempted to clean up this area, but the scale of contamination overwhelms their resources. A $50 million World Bank project managed to secure just one of the 23 dumps. For Azamat and the people here, the Cold War never really ended. The uranium that powered Soviet nuclear ambitions continues to claim lives decades after the mines closed. A radioactive legacy that will persist for thousands of years in this forgotten corner of the world. Now it's time to look at some metropolis nightmares. You see, as the global population soars, cities have grown to a breaking point, and our next urban hellscapes concentrate in some of the world's most gigantic cities, where the population keeps growing despite infrastructure barely changing for decades. And there are megacities, and then there's Dhaka, a metropolis so overcrowded it feels like it's swallowing itself. More than 44,500 people squeeze into each square kilometer, making it the most densely populated city on Earth. As new arrivals pour in daily, fleeing floods, droughts, and poverty in rural Bangladesh, the city presses inward. Buildings grow taller, streets more congested, slums more suffocating.
Look how many people there are, man. They weren't kidding, 44,000 per square kilometer?
Underneath all of this, the sewers struggle to cope, and that's where the city's invisible workforce comes in. The sewer cleaners who begin their day before dawn, as rainwater already starts filling the drains beneath Bangladesh's capital. Dhaka is the city of water, but not in the way tourists imagine when they think of Venice or Amsterdam. Here, water is an enemy. Built on floodplains, during monsoon season, the streets become canals of floating debris, feces, and chemical runoff.
Why did they build a city where there's lots of floods? Oh, mama.
Residents wade through knee-high filth on their way to work, carefully avoiding open manholes that swallow unsuspecting pedestrians whole.
Oh my god, what a way to die. You get sucked in. Oh, the horror. And then you just drown with fucking poo-poo and water in your mouth.
Such extreme population density, Dhaka's ancient drainage system never stood a chance, and as workers lower themselves into the sewers, the stench hits like a physical force. The water is often waist deep and rising. The only tools are hands and bamboo poles used to poke at blockages. There is no protective gear, no gloves, no boots, and no masks to filter the methane fumes. Which is why in 2008, 7 cleaners died doing this job. New to the work, they didn't know how to hold onto the ropes when clearing blockages.
And then they just
the surging
like
water
that.
Then sucked them in, and when their bodies were finally recovered,
it's not even like a quick death. You drown in shit.
The skin had been eaten away by the chemicals in the sewage.
Oh my god!
Sewer cleaners earn about 9,000 taka for this unbelievably tough job, which is roughly $85 a month. Barely enough to ever feed their families living in the city's crowded bastions.
They don't even pay
the monsoon
them,
lasts for months, and without these cleaners, Dhaka would drown
our life
in its
isn't
own
so
waste.
bad, huh?
However, as the lowest caste members of society, they remain largely invisible, except when the sewers back up and floods threaten the city. And then suddenly, everyone remembers they exist. But the sewer workers aren't the only ones suffering in Dhaka's working conditions. In the garment factories that line the city, young women stitch together clothing for global brands, working up to 16-hour shifts in windowless rooms where temperatures reach 110 Fahrenheit, knowing that if a fire breaks out, the exits will all likely be locked, just as they were in the 2012 Tazreen Fashions factory fire that burned 100.
They locked people up there? Dude, it was national news when that guy got locked in during a tornado at an Amazon factory. By the way, nothing ever happened with that. Nothing ever does. Yeah.
12 workers alive.
On the streets of Dhaka in Bangladesh, anger over working conditions at factories like this one making garments destroyed by fire. 112 workers died, trapped inside or jumping to their deaths. Now, some 15,000 workers are protesting blocks from the gutted factory.
Nothing ever happens,
justice
man.
for victims and better working conditions.
But to see some even crazier stuff, let's head over to Kinshasa, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's a city originally built for around 200,000 people, and now today holds over 15 million.
How many people live in Austin, Texas? 1 million people live in Austin. This is 50 million. That's a country? Oh, I thought it was a fucking town. I was like, what the fuck? It's impossible. 50 million, man.
Electricity exists in theory, but rarely in practice, as most neighborhoods receive power for just a few hours a week, if at all.
Yeah, that's still
and for
crazy.
the women of Kinshasa, these hardships are compounded by a shadow that hangs over every aspect of daily life, the constant threat of sexual violence. The DRC has been described as having the highest rate of violence, with attacks so normalized that some local militia casually state, if we see girls, it's our right. We can violate them. A 59-year-old community leader in the region explains, several
Western women got nothing. They live in a perfect utopia compared to this, man.
All of our girls have lost their lives. The girls are young, just maybe 13, 14 years old. Then they get pregnant and have to give birth, but their bodies are not well enough developed.
So they probably die.
The women speak of the brutality they've witnessed. Public rape in front of family members, forced rape between victims, and torture involving objects.
Western feminism will never talk about this, man.
That leaves women permanently maimed. As one humanitarian worker put it, the cruelty of sexual violence reported includes pouring melted rubber into women's vaginas and
Why? Hold on. Why? I had no idea it was that bad, man. That is so fucking horrible.
Shooting women in the vagina. Absolutely horrific. But let's move over to the Western Hemisphere, where we'll find Puerto Príncipe.
Not bad. Why do Western feminists, like in America and like Europe, never want to like help other women in other countries, man? I like hearing that. I want to like fucking just like go over there and fucking set the record straight or some shit, man. That's fucked up.
Haiti, where chaos breeds
no, it's
its own
about
form
me
of control as
in
official
America,
authorities
right?
evaporated. Today, the government no longer rules the country. Roaming gangs and warlords do. You don't just wake up and go to work. First, you need to know who's in charge of your street today. A wrong turn into rival territory could mean a kidnapping, a beating, or even worse. People learn to walk with their heads down, to never ask too many questions, and to always have a little extra cash in their pockets in case someone with a gun demands a tax. Over 80% of the city is now under gang control. Food trucks need their approval to enter certain districts, water deliveries are taxed at every checkpoint, and fuel is hoarded and sold back at black market prices. And when a gang wants to make a point, they're known to simply cut off supply routes entirely, simply leaving thousands of families to survive however they can. In districts like Cité Soleil, one of the most violent slums in the world, gang wars can last for weeks and kidnappings have become an industry. Gangs take doctors, teachers, shopkeepers, anyone who looks like they might have a family willing to pay. And if the money doesn't come, bodies turn up in ditches. Everyone knows someone who's been taken, and most just never come back. If you were a young man here, your choice is simple. Join a gang or risk being seen as a threat, and refusing means you could be targeted anyway, recruited by force or punished for your defiance. But the thing is, the city wasn't always like this. Before the 2010 Haiti earthquake and all the corruption surrounding it,
since the devastating earthquake that ravaged Haiti, killing more than 316,000 people, leaving at least 1 million homeless.
My foundation is...
You know what's sad is I remember when that happened, I sent a bunch of clothes to Haiti. Yeah, my school did that. Yeah, we sent a bunch of clothes over there. All our parents got asked to like send clothes over there.
Contributed $1 million there to the construction of emergency storm shelters in Leogan.
Scammed?
But according to a new expose in The Nation magazine, the shelters turned out to be a series of trail.
Yeah, you don't know any better as a child, chat. Yeah, you just get told, right? I did it because I thought I was helping, you know? I hope to help someone, but, you know, maybe it just never got there.
Beset with problems including mold, shoddy construction, in one case worrying levels of formaldehyde.
Oh, and Haiti also hired contractors that were U.S., and they bullied out all the Haiti construction people that could have actually had a job, and then they pulled out. Yeah, we love that. We love America.
Trailers are also built by the same company, Clayton Homes, that's currently being sued in the U.S. for providing formaldehyde-laced trailers to displace residents after Hurricane Katrina.
There was a time when people gathered in the markets without fear, when parents would let their children play outside after dark, and some still hope for this return, to become like their neighbor in the Dominican Republic, but others have just given up, trapped and unable to leave. But Port-au-Prince isn't the only example of this. If we go over all the way to Sudan, once a functioning capital city, Khartoum has been transformed into an active war zone where residents are caught between crossfire, looting militias, and a total lack of government control. For one family in the Haj Yusuf district of eastern Khartoum, the morning begins with a desperate calculation. Is the day safe enough to venture outside for water? Which route might avoid the rapid support forces?
Chat, you have a crisis getting out of bed and figuring out what VTuber you want to watch. These people are like, there's only one bombing in the recent, like, week or so. It's probably a good time to get some water for my family. Chat, I'm so thankful we're here, man. This is so sad.
Checkpoints. All the army's artillery shells fall close to home again. Their two-story home once represented stability, but now the top floor has been abandoned after a shell tore through the roof just 3 months ago. The family now has to sleep in the bathtub or under the concrete staircase, the only places offering some minimal protection from artillery. You see, this civil war erupted in April 2023, when tensions between Sudan's military and the RSF paramilitary group exploded into an open conflict. The RSF quickly seized control of most of Khartoum, subjecting civilians to months of brutal occupation before the army began its recent counter-offensive. The father of the family pierced through a small gap in the window's metal shutters, scanning for movement. Outside, the street that once bustled with neighbors and vendors lies eerily empty. Blocks of buildings stand damaged and ransacked, some blackened by fire, most pockmarked with bullet holes. The charred remains of vehicles live at the roadside, mingled with discarded furniture and the debris of urban warfare. Even water has become a weapon in this conflict. The warring factions cut supply lines to civilian areas, which is transforming basic survival needs into tactical advantages. Last week, the mother waited 4 hours in line at a community well, only to rush home when gunfire erupted nearby. The 20 liters she managed to collect have to last the family of 5 for cooking, drinking, and minimal washing. The children haven't attended school in months, and their only education really just consists of learning which sounds mean danger, and a distant thump of artillery is less worrying than the crack of nearby sniper fire. But at least the children can identify which armed group is nearby simply by the vehicles they drive.
You get spawn camps as soon as you're born over there, dude.
The teenage son, once preparing for university, just spends his days scanning neighborhoods for food supplies to bring home, witnessing things that no young person should ever see. Bodies in the streets, executions at checkpoints, and women dragged away by armed men. When retreating RSF fighters swept through their neighborhood last week, the family huddled silently in their bathroom, pressing towels against the door crack to hide any sign of presence. And through the wall, they hear their neighbor's door being kicked in, followed by gunshots and screams. Learning that the neighbors had been executed, shot in the back as they entered the gate. There's only a few good neighborhoods to escape to, but even then, the whole city lacks clean water, electricity, waste management, healthcare, and physical safety. But nothing can compare to a city like Ulaanbaatar and
He keeps saying like nothing can compare, and then it just gets worse.
Mongolia. Ulaanbaatar is the capital city of the country, but as soon as you step into the city in winter, your body immediately protests. The first breath is like swallowing fire. The -40 Fahrenheit air burns your throat, and the cold particles suspend in this air, scraping your lungs like sandpaper. Your eyes water instantly, forming tiny icicles on your eyelashes. But the cold isn't what's truly killing people in the world's coldest capital. It's what they must do to survive it. Look out across the city at dawn. From the hills surrounding the center, thousands of smoke plumes rise from the vast settlements.
Oh, they have like yurts. Look, chat. I know what yurts are because of fucking Age of Empires. That's how ignorant I am.
These 1.5 million residents live, all without any running water, sewage systems, or central heating. So people just burn whatever they can find: old furniture, plastic bottles, and old clothing. Children then breathe in this air that researchers compared to smoking 60 cigarettes daily.
What?
And when you walk through the narrow paths after snowfall, you just start to notice something really strange. The snow turns black within hours, covered in a layer of soot. During winter, when cold air traps pollution close to the ground, Ulaanbaatar's air pollution levels can spike to 133 times the WHO's recommended safety limits. You often find yourself lost in what locals call the soot, air that's just so thick with pollutants that visibility drops to virtually nil.
It's
so bad that tourists travel
man.
there just to experience this for themselves, only to develop severe coughs, headaches, and insomnia. And then only for a brief summer can residents finally breathe again without pain, all before the cycle begins again. In a city
in Mongolia, summers are so short too,
where staying warm means slowly poisoning yourself and everyone around you. But you see, when researchers compile lists of the world's deadliest cities, you'll notice that Latin America consistently claims over 40 of the top 50 spots.
Woo!
On a
Brazil
bloody list of
#1!
urban slaughterhouses where murder has just become routine. However, pinning down the most dangerous cities on Earth has always been tricky, as many that once seemed beyond redemption actually improve, while previously peaceful towns suddenly erupt in bloodshed. And nowhere illustrates this volatility better than Duran, Ecuador. As in 2017, this unremarkable port city recorded just 11 murders. And yet by 2023, just 6 years later, that number had skyrocketed to 456.
What happened? Gangs? Cartels? Well, yeah, they move into like, my friend went to, I think it was Cancun, and she said that like, you kind of have to be really careful even though it's kind of safe. You basically live in a place or stay at a place where you kind of pay the toll.
Giving Duran the highest murder rate on Earth of 147
like even
per
in safe
100,000
places like
residents.
that.
Now, to put this into perspective,
Just
this
don't
means
go
roughly
anywhere.
1 in every 680
This is like a
Duran
million
residents
times worse,
will be
obviously.
murdered in a single year. And if these rates continue, a person living in Duran for a decade would face approximately a 1 in 68 chance of being murdered. The city's descent into
pretty
chaos
low,
began in
chat.
February 2022, when people discovered corpses hanging from the main footbridge, mutilated bodies swinging above rush hour traffic as a message from gangs that gained a foothold in the area. And what followed was industrialized.
You're just going to work and then you just see a dead body. Oh!
Killing. 8 separate massacres occurred in just 5 weeks between December 2023 and January
1 in
2024.
68,
And
I'd
public
win.
officials who challenged authority were executed in broad daylight. And the fighting
I
still
remember
continues to
that.
this day. And across the continent, we can find Ciudad Juarez, a Mexican border city where public cartel violence is widespread.
Viva la
However, it's a
Mexico.
changing situation. You see, at its peak in 2010, Juarez averaged 8 murders daily. A common sight there would be to watch bodies hanging from roads and bridges as you drive to your local OXXO across the street. It was so bad that even Sicario had to make a film about this. However, violence here today has actually dramatically declined from those darkest days. Yet the psychological damage remains, as many children there can learn to identify the caliber of weapons from gunshot sounds, and know exactly
Oh
which
my
streets mean certain
God.
death on which days of the week, with many
Most kids that learn that in America is from fucking playing PUBG. Oh my god. And they have to live that life. Chat! I'm grateful for where I am, man.
in the state of Chihuahua accustomed to narcos, roadblocks, Sicario shootouts in the rancho, and express kidnappings. Something that's even worse in South Africa.
Ooh, I
South
have a
African
friend from
cities
South
present
Africa.
a different kind of dystopian nightmare. One where kidnappings has exploded by nearly 200% in just the past decade alone.
South
Police
Africa.
recorded almost 11,000 kidnappings in 2021, with more than half occurring in the Gauteng province, which is home to Johannesburg.
Yeah,
and the pattern
they're
of
from
these kidnappings
Johannesburg
always
and
tends to be consistent.
Pretoria.
The British Airways pilot is approached by a woman in Johannesburg supermarket, asking for help with her bags, only to be bundled into a vehicle by armed men, who subject him to hours of torture and physical assault until he's left penniless. A wheelchair-bound city manager is then stopped by men in police uniforms who dragged her and her driver into a vehicle, holding them for 7 days while demanding ransoms of up to $260,000. Or just like the Portuguese butcher shop owner who was abducted from his workplace by men in 2 pickup trucks, joining the dozens of other foreign business people targeted each month. And yet
I'm telling you that my friend had some fucked up stories over there. And by the way, the well-off white South Africans that live there, they still have to go through it too. They actually had to have a kidnapping case at one point. Their entire house, like, she showed me pictures of their house, and she had a tiny little window with, like, tiny bars that were, like, you know, inside of the window, and it's, like, this little, like, mail slot, essentially.
these are all true stories from South
She lived in a
Africa's
house like
ultra-violent
that.
urban neighborhoods, where brutal muggings, kidnapping, and sexual violence
So they
takes
moved
place
'cause they were
brazenly on the streets
scared.
in the middle of the day. But how could we go through this entire video without mentioning America's urban hellscapes? You see, America's urban failures aren't limited to its declining
America!
cities. Some of the most soul-crushing environments on Earth are found in America's endless suburban sprawl, while you'll find cookie-cutter developments stretching for miles
Oh
with
yeah,
just no
look at the white
character,
picket
community, or
fences.
connectivity. It's almost designed for robots. Drive through the suburbs of Phoenix, Las Vegas, or Houston, and you'll encounter
Houston? Houston, Texas?
what folk singer Malvina Reynolds famously mocked in a 1962 song, Little Boxes.
Yeah.
Little boxes made of ticky-tacky little boxes all the same. She wrote the song after seeing endless rows of identical homes covering hillsides in Daly City, California.
Fucking Great Britain is like that too. Yeah. I've been to, well not been to, but I've seen pictures of London and some other bigger industrial, you know, cities, because I had friends from there, and they told me, like, all the houses are kind of the same too. Birmingham. Yeah, the ones that are, like, basically they used to be factories, like industrial factory cities.
60 years later, and the situation has only worsened. Life in these developments is a
I hate
disorientating
prefabs.
experience. Walk half an hour up the road and there's just no variation. The same beige houses with the same 2-car garages, and the same perfectly trimmed lawns stretch to the horizon.
HOAs, all the same roofs.
are no landmarks, no corner stores, and very little to help you orient yourself. As if you're literally walking in the Truman Show. And to many around the world, this is the American dream. But little do people realize that the isolation these places can create isn't just physical, but psychological. The cul-de-sac layout ensures you can't walk anywhere useful. Front porches, once spaces for community engagement, have been replaced by garages that allow people to enter their homes without ever setting foot outside. Fences divide backyards into isolated squares. And despite homes being built mere feet apart, meaningful
and then look like how the spacing,
interaction
I hate that.
is rare. A resident outside Dallas described how after living in the home for 3 years, he could recognize only 2 of his neighbors by sight. Everyone drives in, the garage door closes, and that's it, he explained. There's no reason to be outside, there's nowhere to walk to. These neighborhoods enforce conformity through homeowners associations with rules that border on absurd.
I hate HOAs, man, so much. They even exist in Europe now.
These homeowner associations dictate acceptable paint colors, lawn heights, and whether basketball hoops can be visible from the street. One homeowner in Phoenix received a $150 fine just because his garage door was left open for more than an hour. Another was threatened with legal action because her roses were the wrong shade of red.
You know what I would do? I'd fucking cut those roses, paint them the right shade of red, and then fucking throw it in the person's car that told me off.
According to the approved plant
you
list,
dumb bitch.
The construction quality matches the design philosophy. Built quickly, cheaply, and without any character.
Ew.
Walls are so thin the conversations carry through them and cracks often appear within months. These developments were ironically marketed as an escape from urban problems. The post-World War II sales pitch promised clean air, open space, and community.
Yeah,
instead, they created new problems: isolation, loneliness, car dependency, and depressing sameness.
And the car dependency was orchestrated by the car companies. Let's fucking go.
However, worst of all is the soul-sucking US city traffic. Words can't express how awful it really is. As drivers lose 119 hours each year, that's the equivalent of 15 full work days in a row, spent staring at brake lights, breathing exhaust fumes, and inching forward a few feet at a time. The city's infamous traffic isn't just occasional congestion, it's a chronic condition that transforms commutes into endurance tests.
Oh man, when I lived in Auckland, dude, I remember over 5 or 6 years, because the city, this is in America by the way, but you guys think that congestion is bad in like America? In New Zealand, because the population exploded and there's like only so many suburban areas, what happens is the traffic got worse every single fucking year. I remember in 2000, like, I want to say like 13, you could drive from the suburbs all the way into the city probably in like 35 to 40 minutes, like stepping on the gas. By 2018, it took an hour and a half because the infrastructure literally can't handle it anymore. Like, at least in America, it kind of stays the same. Like, it gets worse, like, every 10 years. It's actually doubling and tripling.
As one Los Angeles resident
because they didn't think about how big it would get.
I cannot comprehend how people navigate LA traffic daily without going clinically insane. The infamous 405 freeway has been widened repeatedly, growing to 14 lanes in some sections. 14? And yet the traffic remains relentless. During Thanksgiving weekend, the gridlock becomes so legendary that news helicopters broadcast aerial footage of it as an annual tradition. From above, the headlights and taillights stretch the horizon like rivers of light flowing nowhere. One driver described what happened when he tried to drive to his parents' house 40 miles away for Thanksgiving dinner. I left at 2 p.m. thinking I'd beat the rush. 5 hours later, I was still on the freeway.
Everyone else is fucking thinking that too, that's why it's so funny.
I missed dinner completely. The toll extends beyond just wasted time. The physical impact shows in rising rates of obesity, heart disease, and chronic stress. The mental toll appears in increased rates of anxiety, depression, and reduced life satisfaction. For those who can't afford to live closer to work, the daily commute becomes a carefully choreographed ritual. Quote, I have a whole setup, snacks in the console, water bottle, phone charger, audiobooks all queued up. Explained one Houston resident who navigates the 26-lane Katy freeway daily. I've learned exactly which lanes move faster at which points. Where that is. It's like I've developed a weird expertise in something completely useless.
So
all of this
true.
is a symptom of a much bigger problem in America. The cities have committed to a transportation model that just cannot scale with population growth. More lanes create more traffic, more cars create more pollution, more highways then create more sprawl. It's a vicious cycle that transforms daily travel into an exercise in collective masochism. But let's just take a moment to process what we've seen on Earth. These aren't just statistics or sensations.
I don't know, man. I'll still take that over, you know, getting shot at and like fucking missiles dropping on my head.
Stories. These are real places right now.
Yeah, sure, it
sucks
ass.
Trying to build lives amid unimaginable challenges. And the scariest part of all of this is that
digging
only a
in
few of
shit.
these places have always been like this. Most of the places that we've discussed in this video were just ordinary towns a few years ago. Which makes you think, if this is what humanity has created in just a century of rapid urbanization, what urban hellscapes await us in the century to come?
And
thank you, Fume, for sponsoring this video. Remember to check them out with the link in the description below.
And people wonder where they're going insane. Well, that made me appreciate what I have, chat. Maybe it isn't so bad that I have allergies. Yeah, I could be dying of lung cancer.